Teamsters Local 856 miscellaneous employees, Teamsters Local 856 wastewater treatment plant employees, Pacifica Police Officers Association, Pacifica Police Supervisors Association, and Police Management Association. City Clerk Coffey, do we have public comment?
Those members of the public wishing to speak on the closed session item just read by the mayor, please raise your hand now if you wish to make a public comment on the closed session item A. Mayor Beckmeyer, I see no raised hands from the public at this time.
All right, then we will retire to closed session and return for our 7 o'clock open session. Thank you.
The recording has stopped.
The regular session of the special meeting of the Pacifica City Council on June 1st. City Attorney, do we have a closed session report?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No reportable action this evening.
All right. Then we'll have a salute to the flag. Oh, first roll call by the City Clerk. Please, City Clerk Coffey.
Councilmember Big Stick.
Present.
Councilmember Vaterlos.
Here.
Councilmember O'Neill.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Beer.
Here.
Mayor Beckmeyer.
Here. And a salute to the flag by Councilmember O'Neill.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And City Clerk Coffey, do you have notes for tonight's meeting?
Yes, I'll make a few announcements regarding tonight's meeting format. This meeting is being held by video conference with no physical location open to the public. The public can observe and participate in the meeting via the Zoom link provided in the agenda or by phone to the dial-in number and webinar ID provided in the agenda. This meeting may also be observed live on local TV channel 26 or online at www.cityofpacifica.org/live stream. For this meeting, live verbal public comments may be made through participation by Zoom. For members of the public participating via Zoom, use the raise hand button to indicate that you wish to speak on an agenda item when the mayor calls upon that agenda item. Because this is a special meeting, public comments are limited to the special order of business as listed on the agenda. For those participating by phone, use *9 to raise your hand to request to speak. The city clerk will call upon speakers at the appropriate time and allow you to unmute after calling you by screen name or the last 4 digits of your phone number if you're calling in. Please clearly state your full name for the record at the start of your public comment. Written and email public comments will not be read during the meeting, but will be made part of the written record and provided to council members. The format of this meeting may be altered or the meeting may be canceled if needed. You may check on the status of the meeting by visiting the city's website at www.cityofpacifica.org for any updates.
Thank you. So our item for consideration this evening is to hear the proposed 5-year capital improvement program, the budget for 21-22 capital improvement program project expenditures, and American Rescue Plan Act update. The action is to receive the presentation and provide direction. And our presentation will begin with City Manager.
Sure, I'll make very brief introductory comments and then turn it over to Public Works Director Peterson, and then Assistant City Manager Wermeister will talk a little bit about the American Rescue Plan Act portion. But again, our budget process this year is more involved and a little bit different than previous years. And because the capital improvement program is so critical to all of the projects that we spend funding on and meet council priorities and public safety priorities, we really wanted to take advantage of this special meeting that we had penciled in anyways to go through the CIP, fairly thoroughly to go through the projects and present the rationale for what's there and get council input. Before we return, our next step in the budget process, June 14th, is the public hearings for the proposed budget. So with that introduction, I will turn it over to Director Peterson.
Good evening. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem and council members. Lisa Peterson, Director of Public Works. We have a short presentation tonight on our proposed capital improvement program. Specifically, I'm going to be focusing on our fiscal year 21-22 CIP budget and those allocations. And also we'll be having a discussion on the American Rescue Plan Act. Next slide, please. So our agenda tonight, as I mentioned, I'm going to be discussing the proposed CIP, the funding for our fiscal year 21-22. And following that discussion, there'll be an opportunity for the council to ask questions of both myself and Deputy Director Sun and Deputy Director Batista, also our city engineer. Following our answering of those questions, we will have Assistant City Manager, Planning Director Wermeister talk a bit about the American Rescue Plan Act. Next slide, please. So just a quick introduction on the capital improvement program. Our CIP is a planning tool. We do have a number of very important infrastructure, critical infrastructure within our city, and we need to prioritize how we repair that infrastructure or build new infrastructure or upgrade infrastructure. And it does require a significant amount of public resources for that funding. Of course, with COVID-19, that has definitely impacted our budget this year. We also do have issues with our staff capacity. So we have a limited number of new capital improvement projects that we're proposing this year, a total of 7 that are new and 1 that was previously on our CIP but was unfunded, which I'll talk more about later. Our Civic Center project is the only project that we're proposing to use our general fund balance, and we're proposing $3 million out of that. All of the other projects for our CIP fiscal year 21-22 are to be funded from other fund sources. Next slide, please. I did want to talk a bit about the attachments that are part of your report that are related to the CIP. The first one, very large one, is that draft CIP book for our 5-year outlook from 2021 through 26. That, as I mentioned, is a planning document. That document has both funded and unfunded projects in it. And this is the document that the Planning Commission approves for our general plan conformance, which they recently just did. It does have estimated project costs in there going out into future years. As I mentioned, it is a draft. It will be finalized once the council does decide on fiscal year 21-22 capital improvement projects and those allocations, then that would be finalized within this large book. Additionally, we do have the attachment, which is a spreadsheet of the proposed capital improvement funding for 21-22. And this actually provides specific project funding recommendations out of various funds. The third attachment we have is a summary description, just a quick description of what these 58 projects are. We've also broken them down into either discretionary or non-discretionary projects. Next slide, please. So this is small on this slide. I understand that. I will get into more detail as we move forward. I just wanted everyone to see what it looked like. It is a spreadsheet. On the left, you have the 58 projects. The ones that are yellow are the new or newly funded projects. We show the fund, where it's coming from, the allocation amount, and also the totals from those funds. Next slide, please. So the proposed fiscal year 21-22 CIP fund expenditures are shown here. We have our Fund 1, which is our general fund, and as mentioned, we are recommending taking $3 million from the balance of our general fund to put towards the Civic Center project that the council has had a number of discussion on. We also have our Fund 9, which is our street construction fund, and we are recommending a $25,000 allocation from that towards our fiscal year 21-22 CIP projects. And just for those, as a reminder, our street reconstruction Fund 9 is where our gas tax, our SB1, Measure W, and A reside. From our Fund 16, which is our NPDES fund, we are recommending a $60,000 allocation to our projects for next fiscal year. NPDES stands for the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System. What this fund does is it funds projects that are going to prevent stormwater pollution. From Fund 19, our drainage fund, we're recommending a $100,000 allocation to projects. The drainage fund is for planning and construction of drainage facilities. We also have our Fund 27, our Roy Davies Fund, which we're recommending an allocation of $995,000 to projects. The Roy Davies Fund was a donation that benefits projects that are put through by our Parks, Beaches, and Recreation Department. From Fund 38, our Disaster Accounting Fund, we are recommending an allocation towards projects of $343,000. This fund is, let's see, sorry. Oh, I think I missed one, but I'll go back. So the $343,000, that is from the Disaster Accounting Fund, which was established for local emergencies. I did miss our Fund 34, which is our wastewater fund for capital projects through wastewater. And what this does is it funds sewer facility construction. We are recommending $7.9 million out of that fund. We have also our American Rescue Plan Act. That's money that we are expecting to get from the federal government. We are recommending $155,000 allocation from that fund towards the CIP projects for next year. From Measure A, we're recommending a $230,000 allocation to next year's CIP program. The Measure A, of course, is that San Mateo County half-a-cent sales tax, some of which that money the city receives. We have our grants, revenues, and some of these grants are grants, not ones just that we have been awarded, but also grants that we are hoping to receive. Revenues, insurance reimbursements, which comes to a total of $11.9 million. And then our CIP fund reserves, which we're recommending $1.1 million out of that to be allocated towards our fiscal year 21-22 CIP projects. Next slide, please. So just to talk a bit about the discretionary and non-discretionary project allocation that we're doing between these projects that are in the CIP for next fiscal year. As mentioned, we do have a total of 58 CIP projects. From discretionary projects, there are 12, and we are considering discretionary projects those where, although they're very important, there is a choice to implement them next year in some cases. So as I mentioned, there were 12 projects that we considered discretionary. One of those projects was previously unfunded on the CIP, and we are recommending funding for next fiscal year out of the CIP reserves. For non-discretionary projects, we have 46 projects. We consider the non-discretionary projects those that are necessary to move forward. We've also broken those into 9 subcategories based on criteria. And of those, as I previously mentioned, 7 are new projects. Now, there are quite a number of projects next year. Many of these are ongoing and the council has heard of over the years. I'm not going to go through each one of them as that would take a considerable amount of time, but I do want to highlight those new and newly funded through the reserve projects, and also how we have broken up the non-discretionary projects into subcategories. Next slide, please. So for discretionary projects, there are 12 of these projects. As you can see, a number of them are from our wastewater division. And there is one project that I was talking about previously that was a project that was previously on the CIP, but it was on there as unfunded. And this is really our courtyard vehicle storage project, which is trying to get a cover for our vehicles over at the corporation yard. We had envisioned this as being a bigger project in the past. What we have done is figured out a way that we can downsize this as far as cost, still get some protection for our vehicles. As everybody who lives in Pacifica knows, it's a very caustic environment, the ocean environment, to vehicles. We have a significant investment in our vehicles here in Pacifica at the city. And what we have found is that the vehicles, once they are purchased, often begin rusting within a 2 to 5 year period. So even putting up some less expensive type of awning structure will help to preserve those vehicles for a much longer period of time. And that is what we are recommending from the discretionary projects to fund $50,000 from the fund reserves for this project. Next slide, please. For our non-discretionary projects for fiscal year 21-22, as I mentioned, there's 46 of those projects. They're broken up into subcategories. The first subcategory is administrative need projects. And these are projects that are needed for the administration of the city. So we do have one project under there that is also a new project. This is our financial HR software project. We need to upgrade both the financial and HR software in order to allow for the administration of city affairs. And we are recommending $368,000 be funded from the CIP fund reserves for that project. Under the non-discretionary projects, we also have projects that assess for future CIP projects. And the reason this is important is because we need to plan for those future CIP projects. We need to understand what those are going to be, and we need to try to identify and line up funding. The other thing this does for us is these master plan projects, once they're through, often provide us with a better opportunity to grant funding because we've already done an initial study regarding the projects. We have projects that are awaiting grant funding. These are projects that are important. We consider them non-discretionary. If we had the money, we would move them forward. We continue to look for funding for the ones that are under this subcategory, Manor Drive overpass improvements and Malago Highway 1 on-ramp. We have, of course, the City Council priority projects. So, of course, those are non-discretionary. We are moving those forward. Next slide, please. And we have our grant-funded projects. The majority of these projects are projects where we have either already been awarded some grant funding or we are looking for grant funding, and we're trying to provide those matching funds we need in order to get that grant funding guaranteed. There are 3 new projects on this list for next fiscal year, 21-22. The first one is that North Pacifica Pedestrian Improvement Project. We're recommending a matching fund allocation of $25,000 from Fund 9, our street construction fund. The North Pacifica Pedestrian Improvement Project is one that was awarded to us. It will install 22 ramps in the northern part of Pacifica, some of those with high visibility crosswalks, and that is near the Sunset Ridge Elementary School. We also have 2 projects that are highlighted below that, which are also new projects. These are ones that we submitted to Congresswoman Spears' office through the community grant program. and we were shortlisted for. We are hoping that we get these, although have not heard yet. We are recommending that we put in $200,000 from Measure A in order to match the Sharp Park Priority Development Area Resurfacing Project. And what that project is doing is it is taking a slurry seal, a Cape seal on Sharp Park Road, also on Bradford and Francisco. And it will be resurfacing those streets. Also, we have the Pacifica Municipal Pier Repair Project. We are recommending a matching fund allocation for that for $50,000 from our CIP fund reserves. What that project would do would repair the broken railing out on the pier, and also all the railing that's been identified as having severe or major damage on the pier. Our next subcategory we have are in-progress projects, and these are ones that have been moving forward. Council has probably heard of these all and remembers these. These are ones that are generally moving from one phase to another, such as from the design phase into the construction phase. Next slide, please. We also have projects that are required for our staffing needs in order to have staff here to do the city's work. We need to have desks for them or environments for them to work and get that work done. So we have a number or a few projects on here that are under that category. Of course, we have our required maintenance projects. These projects are doing that important work of either fixing or improving our infrastructure that we have around town. We have lots of critical infrastructure that needs to be repaired. And there are a number of projects under this subcategory. Next slide, please. This continues to be that required maintenance projects category. On this slide, you see the majority of those projects are either happening in our wastewater plant or our wastewater collections. Next slide, please. And then we have our mandated projects. And these are our non-discretionary projects that are either being required by the city code or by state laws, requirements, or by federal law, such as ADA. And as you can see on this, we have 4 highlighted projects. So these are all new projects that we're recommending for funding in fiscal year 21-22. The first one on there is the Police Department Radio Infrastructure Improvement Project. We are recommending allocating $175,000 in CIP fund reserves to that project. That is it's actually a required project for security upgrades to our police department's radio equipment. The next project is the Fire Station 72 Emergency Signal Restoration Project. We're recommending a $65,000 allocation from CIP fund reserves to that project. What that project will be doing is upgrading and repairing those stop signals that are over there at the Lindemar Fire Station. We have our Clara Creek Water Recycling Plant Environmental Compliance Project. This project is going to hire a consultant to support our NPDES permit renewal process. As many of you know, we do have to have a state NPDES permit in place in order to be allowed to operate that plant. So of course, that's an important project. And we are recommending for that $80,000 to come from our wastewater fund 34. And then the final one on this list, which is the 540 Crespi Drive tree replacement project. We're recommending $100,000 from our wastewater fund to go towards this project. And what this project would do, it would be replacing trees that were related to permitting for the EQ basin. Next slide, please. So our recommendation tonight is for the council to provide us with input or direction on our fiscal year 21-22 CIP program and our budget. And we also are recommending to move forward with those projects, which I highlighted that are new or were previously on the CIP but were unfunded, that one project. And I am available for questions. Also, we have Deputy Director City Engineer Bautista, as well as Deputy Director Sun, who can answer specifics about the CIP projects related to their departments. You can also call in directors from other departments who have CIPs on our list if you have specifics about their projects as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from council?
Council members.
Questions from council immediately? Councilmember Big Stick.
Thank you. And I don't know if this sounds strange or not. I actually, I was on packet page 22 and looking at the canceled projects list, and I zeroed in on that. And so some of these make sense why they were canceled. For example, the restrooms in the Civic Center. Well, if everyone's going to be moving in the summer and we're going to be doing a major renovation anyway, then it would make sense that the restrooms aren't going to be addressed right now. Whereas something like the CCWRP R&R project grit classifier upgrade, as near as I could tell, that got absorbed into a slightly different project, or maybe it's the same project. So I guess my question is basically these are either rendered irrelevant by subsequent action or they got absorbed into other projects. And the one I mentioned, I believe it got absorbed into the one on packet page 108. It's the capital improvement page 34-19, although you can't really read the numbers of the capital improvement document underneath the packet page. So it was packet page 108, where the description of that one is. But it looked like that line item got reabsorbed into that one. So it's still there, it's just there slightly different. And I'm wondering if that's the case with basically all of those canceled items.
Thank you. So I would defer to Deputy Director Sun regarding the specifics on the wastewater project. I'm not, I think some of these other ones I would probably have to ask Deputy Director Bautista about, because some of these seems like there's some older projects. But anyway, maybe Deputy Director Sun, you can start.
Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Lewis Sun, Deputy Director of Public Works for wastewater. For the CCWRP repair and replace project, Councilmember Big Stick is correct. All those projects was reabsorbed into a single category, which is listed in attachment 3 under the CCWRP repair and replace. We group them together because they're very similar in nature and they're all focusing on the treatment plant. So all those projects have been absorbed into a single category or single project is listed under attachment 3, CCWRP repair and replace.
So under the, and it got absorbed, the one I was mentioning into the headwaters feasibility and improvements. I don't think I'm going to ask this as seriously as I might, although if it's a very quick response, then I'm open to it. But I was immediately intrigued what exactly a new grit classifier and demolish existing hypochlorite tank. Just kind of wondering mechanically what that does, because the description intrigued me. Again, if you can't describe it in 30 seconds, no need to respond, but I was curious.
No problem, Councilmember Big Stick. So essentially, it's where the headworks, where all the wastewater coming into a treatment plant. The current infrastructure is old, and we want to upgrade that. Essentially, that structure is to reduce the flow to settle all the grit that's coming in. Currently, like as I stated, that particular structure is very old, and we want to improve that. And on the top of that structure, those we do have the chemical tanks stored, and we want to repair and restore those as well.
So the grit classifier actually catches the grit. Is that the notion?
Yes, that's correct.
Cool. All right. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Sam Bautista, your Deputy Director of Public Works, and just to answer the remaining projects. And you are correct, Council Member Big Stick. The remaining projects that are listed there have been assimilated to other projects. So, for instance, the fiscal 2020-21 slurry seal project, that of course is part of a larger project that will be happening in the very near future in July. And so that's why that was canceled. So literally canceled means it's listed somewhere else in the CIP. So did you want me to go over the other ones as well?
No, that answers it. I wanted to just clarification that it's consistently like that across the board.
That's
Thank
correct.
you, Directors Bautista and Sun. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I have a couple questions.
Please go ahead.
Also on packet page 22, there's a bunch of projects that are on hold. And there were two that really stood out to me, and I'm wondering why they're on hold, if it's appropriate for me to ask that question now. That's the Monterey Road drainage improvement and the Rockaway Beach Avenue drainage improvement. Can you explain that to me so I understand?
Sure. So, Mayor Pro Tem Beer, the Monterey Road drainage improvements, we have approximately, let's see here, we have approximately $575,000 that have been listed. However, we don't have enough money in what funds that project is drainage fees. And so at this point in time, we don't have much fees to pay for the project. So until we can collect more fees, it remains on hold. Now, the Rockaway Beach Avenue drainage improvement, same reason, not enough fees in the drainage basin, so we can't move forward with the improvement.
Thank you, Sam. I appreciate your answer.
Other questions from council? Councilmember O'Neill?
A question. I noticed in one part of the budget, you're taking and doing an efficiency study of office space for public works, both in the wastewater treatment plant and I'm assuming on Malagra. But yet there's other items that you're going to be adding a canopy, you're going to be doing different objects, okay? But then you also have a whole study of the facilities, of all the city-owned facilities to, you know, have a master plan basically for the facilities for repairs, replacement, and maintenance. I was wondering, are you going to wait to do those additional improvements until after you do the master plan?
So thank you. I can answer some of those questions. So, for example, the one that has to do with the improvements over at the engineering building, what that is for is we currently have hired a senior engineer who's helping out with wastewater. There is no space over at the wastewater facility for that senior engineer. That person is working remotely right now because there's no space for them. So what that project would do would actually create a space for that person to have an office space here at the city, and would have that with the rest of the engineering folks. The other building that's been discussed over at wastewater is a larger project that would be housing some of the other wastewater staff and also the vehicle cover for specifically those wastewater vehicles that are over there. So that would not be covering any of the field service vehicles. And I don't know if Deputy Director Sun has anything additional he wants to add about that project and the study that we're talking about moving forward with.
Thank you, Director Peterson. Essentially, that is correct. And I would just like to add that we are undertaking a evaluation of our office space and looking at the future vehicle storage and office space building. And the purpose of that evaluation is to determine the right size for that building. We did conduct preliminary evaluation and design, and we do have several different design with different sizes. So now the task is to find the right building size for our division.
And that is at the wastewater treatment plant, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. Well, I just don't want to see we're kind of haphazardly, you know, because some of them were kind of large tickets, like 250,000 or whatever. I don't want to see us spending a lot of money on something, but then we do a master plan or facilities plan that says, oh, we need to remodel what we just did. Do you follow what I mean?
Yeah, and that won't happen in this case. So one of them, like I said, is actually an office space over here at engineering for that senior engineer from wastewater who will stay with the engineers. The other is a separate project over at wastewater that would be dealing with covering their equipment and also addressing needs for staff that are currently over there. And that's one of the reasons they're doing that study, in order to identify exactly what that building needs to be, so that, you know, there is nothing that's started that isn't essential to the functioning of the wastewater treatment facility.
Okay, now the photovoltaic cells for the wastewater plant, and if I remember correctly, because I know this was brought to us about a year ago, year and a half, currently the solar panels that are there supply about 15% of our energy, but the new ones, because those are like 25 years old, they're old, right? But the new ones with new technology was going to increase it to almost 30 or 40%, if I remember correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but when will that project, what's the estimate for that to be finished?
Yeah, thanks for that question. Just like so many things during this last year, that project has also been impacted by COVID, and that the contractor was impacted and was not able to start. But I believe they are moving forward now. They had some issues with staffing and you know, having them work during COVID. So maybe Deputy Director Sun can provide some information on the next steps in that project.
Absolutely. Our construction contractors is Verdun, and they're actually currently in construction right now. They've begun remove all of the fixed array panels. All 528 panels has been removed. They're working on the next part, which is looking into the torque tube, and they're analyzing a new construction method to install the torque tube. And in terms of estimated completion, we are targeting getting this completed by the end of the summer to finish phase one of the photovoltaic project.
And phase one, and what is phase two after that?
After phase one, phase two, we'll be looking at possibly enhancing the tracking array. Phase one was primarily focusing all on the fixed array. So after completing the fixed array, we like to look at the tracking array and enhance some of those panels as well.
Okay. I think on 36, I think we have we're having the work order system, pitch, procure, and install software. Now, is this going to be kind of public customer relations management, where you can actually, someone calls in and you be able to tell them what status their particular issue is, that they can either look it up or we can call up or whatever, or we can send an email out to basically customer relations software so that they know the status of their particular issue, whether it's a pothole, a street light out, or whatever. Is there going to be a public interface with this, or is this staff only?
So this, and Deputy Director Batista, you can correct me here. The work order system, is this the one that's related to Lucity? Or
If it's the work order system for public works, field services, there is a portion of it that has that customer relations module in it, but it's mostly just to track the type of work and the work requested for field services, so we can actually create the database of the work that we've done.
Okay, so it's internal, not external?
well, let me add to that. So Lucity, the system is mainly internal, but we do have the Q Alert system that I believe everybody is aware of, which is more of an external system, or eventually will be an external system. The good thing about the Lucity system is it aligns with the Q Alert system. So Q Alert can communicate with Lucity. And I think ultimately we're looking at the Q Alert system to be the outward facing system for the city. But I would defer, more comments on that probably to the city manager or assistant city manager.
Will this eventually lead us to the ability to have a 311 system?
So currently, we are several months into implementing the Q Alert CRM system, and that is making our tracking and responding to inquiries, complaints, requests more efficient. And I think in the next couple months, we'll probably have an initial status report out on the type of data we're seeing from that system. And then, as was mentioned, there could be an evolution to the Q Alert system that ties to the Lucity or work order system, as well as there could be an evolution to Q Alert to have a public-facing interface, like you're suggesting, sort of like a 311 system, but more, online requests that automatically direct the request, pothole repair or whatever it is. So yeah, that's a potential. We wanted to launch and get used to the CRM system internally and use it for internal response management before we moved into any future phases.
I also was curious, when we do something, we never really say we're doing it, we just are doing it. And I know, like driving down Linamar Boulevard, there's a sign there that says this part was paved by SB1. Is it possible when we have a public works system, like we're repaving the streets, especially, your tax dollars at work, or when we, your sewer fees, keep making a cleaner ocean, something like that, because we have a lot of stuff from the sewer fund, but then we have people upset that sewer fees go up and they don't know what it's being used for. But if we can start putting signs up, like drive down to Highway 1 at the mid coast, they're putting in their EQ basin and they have a whole big sign there saying do what it's for, what it's doing, and how it's funded. And I really wish we could do something like that. It doesn't have to be a big ostentatious sign, but just something like the SB1 sign that says funded by SB1. Maybe we can start, especially as we do have an organized system of paving the streets, we kind of blow our own horn and toot our own horn saying, hey, we listen to you, we're paving streets. I would really like to see if we could put that signs up about that.
Yeah, I know in 2019, pre-COVID, we did project signs like that for the EQ Basin, for the cattle, the Gina Fassler parking lot at the end of Fassler, as well as for the Pedro Point wastewater mains replacement. And so, we've been doing it and plan to continue to do it, and hopefully can enhance that kind of messaging and outreach.
Okay, and I noticed, I can't find it, or I forgot to write it down, that we're doing a pipeline repair on Anza between 941 or 943 or something like that. And is that part of the equalization process, basin construction or rehabilitation?
So I'm not Deputy Director Sun. Is that something you can respond to? I'm not.
I need some little more clarification with Anza, Councilmember O'Neill, you're referring to Anza Pump Station?
No, there were some, I'll let Tiger has his hand up. I'll go poke around and try to find it again. I wrote it down and it disappeared off my computer. So I'll let Tiger talk and then I'll look for it. Thanks.
Councilmember Big Stick?
Thank you. And I just experienced some odd anomaly in which my computer informed me my connection is unstable. All of you were frozen for like 5 seconds. It was something out of a sci-fi movie. It was very strange. But if there should be a disconnect, I'll turn off my video and hopefully that'll stabilize it. But my question is similar to the one that Mike first asked, except my version has to do with the fire station. Because it looks like the fire station is due to be, both of them, replaced outright, and yet there's also all these different maintenance lines about the fire station. Like the connector bridge makes sense to me, that needs to be updated, period. But something like painting the fire station, for example, well, if we're going to replace it, why are we painting it, was kind of a question I had. And there were a handful of lines like that.
So again, the big CIP book is a planning document. So oftentimes those are projects that we're putting in there, for planning purposes. As those projects come out and we determine how those are moving forward, that comes forward in our CIP next fiscal year funding document. Regarding those specific projects, we could certainly provide you some information if you wanted to give us the page number and we could look through those.
It was more a general question that came up. I could dig through it, but I was wondering, I guess, if you had an easy answer on that one.
Councilmember O'Neill, the project that you were talking about is the Anza Drive storm drain project between 943 and 951 Anza Drive. It's to improve drainage in the area. Once again, it's one of those projects that it's funded by drainage fees, but there's not enough drainage fees to pay for the improvement. So the project itself is that there's a low spot in the area, and it's just to improve the drainage. We also need to obtain easements from certain from the property owners so we can connect a storm drain to the main storm line to convey the drainage.
This is like the third or fourth project that's being postponed due to inadequate money in the drainage fee account. Where does the money that goes into the drainage fee account come from? Is it developer fees? Is it
That's correct. It's developer fees, and when houses get built, they pay that fee, and of course there isn't much development or subdivisions that are or it's really just subdivisions that that pay into the fee. So if there are no subdivisions that are being built, there won't be any fees into those drainage basins.
And on a related note, if I could add, you may remember from last week, we're recommending budget this year, not in the CIP, but this is in the operating budget, to do a fee study and development fee study so we can, it's been many years, so that we can right size those fees.
Well, no, that's well and good, but I don't see major subdivisions happening because Ms. Batista said it was no subdivisions and that's what basically funds it. But I know at one point we were talking about assessment districts because I know Rockaway Beach was really concerned about that creek they have there. And I noticed in the capital improvement plan, there was a thing for putting it underground. And that seems to me almost like a perfect thing for a, assessment district there versus waiting for drainage fees for houses that, may never get built or whatever to pay for it. So is there something we could do or approach the property owners that for a major project like that for an assessment district?
Yeah, the answer is yes, that the assessment district funding tool exists. And I would defer to Director Peterson and Batista for more details on that process. But
I'm just familiar with that process, but that might not be the only mechanism. Is there some mechanism to fund, because the drainage fees that are all being postponed are not like one-offs for one house, they're for neighborhoods. And I was wondering if that would benefit a neighborhood. And is there some vehicle that we can communicate to those neighbors that maybe you want to take the bull by the horns and do it, Right.
And a question for Director Peterson might be, for our stormwater master plan, could the scope of that study also include an evaluation of different funding mechanisms or a summary of typical types of funding mechanisms, perhaps that we haven't considered?
And the answer is yes. And typically master plans do that. They provide that information. They look at funding, but we could specifically ask them to look at assessment districts for that as well. I'm not sure if Deputy Director Batista has anything to add to that.
And when the report comes out, could we identify those projects that an assessment district could be a feasible option? And I'm not trying to pick on Rockaway, but that's a very clearly defined neighborhood. Many houses have an issue. And that seems to me to be almost made for an assessment district if they want to get it fixed. You know what I mean? And is it possible to, identify projects that this might be a viable option?
I think that could be something that could be done with staff's help. I think the consultant would need to, understand sort of the dynamics of Pacifica. And so with staff's help, there could be a recommendation, certainly, that could be prepared.
Okay.
And then is it possible to fund those projects from other kinds of funding besides the fees? I'm really concerned about the Rockaway Beach drainage. So that one really stood out to me, and I'm concerned about that. So is there any other opportunities for us to find money somewhere to do that project?
And, sometimes you can get grant funding for specific types of projects. Typically, I have found that trying to get grant funding for that type of project tends to be difficult. So, we do keep our eyes open for grant funding opportunities, which is really where you're going to get your funding opportunities outside of the city, unless you are doing some sort of assessment district or bond measure or such. But we certainly do keep our eyes open for funding opportunities.
Thank you.
I just wanted to follow up on my firehouse question, if I may.
Go ahead.
And in the future, if we stick to electronic, and I remember the old CIP booklet that was bound, the packet page number is directly over the CIP page number, which just makes it slightly more difficult to navigate the actual document in electronic form. So if just in the future, if that could be adjusted so that we could see the CIP page numbers. But
thank you for that comment. Actually, the Clerk Coffee made that comment, and we had discussed having that corrected in the final document. So thank you for pointing that out as well.
Sure, no worries. But the initial replacement of the firehouse is discussed on packet page 62, and that places it at beginning year 24-25. And what I noticed after my initial comment is that most of the firehouse related improvements starting on packet page 63, it looks like most of them are really starting in fiscal year 22-23. So it's really only that bridge, that deck replacement that is coming up for this coming fiscal year. But again, I was just kind of wondering why we might be, for example, painting the fire station in 22-23 if we're going to be replacing it outright in 25-26. And the painting is on 64.
Thank you for that question. So to discuss the deck project, and Deputy Director Batista can add any additional information as needed, but that's really an ADA.
Right, and like I said, the deck actually made perfect sense to me. That was the one that and plus, you can replace that entire building and still have the deck remaining is what occurred to my sensibility. I don't know how it works in the real world, but like I say, that made sense to me as I was reading through that. It was more like the putting a fresh coat of paint on when 4 years later you might be replacing the building. Or 3 years.
Right, and I think some of these things, and again, I probably have Deputy Director Batista jump in here, but some of these things occur because we need to also consider these routine maintenance, because oftentimes we have a desire to have a building built within 4 years, but that doesn't happen. And so if we just defer all the maintenance, the required maintenance, then of course you end up with a much bigger problem. So the goal is to continue maintaining those structures until we for sure have identified funding to build an entire new fire station, which we know would be a lot of money. And Deputy Director Batista, did you have anything else to add?
So if you see the this fire station project, that we program lots of money at the end, and it says 30 million, but it's just to signify that there's a need for it. There's no funding for it, but there is a need. But we show something in the future here. But of course, building a fire station is a multi-year, multi-phase type of project. So, but it's just to signify that, hey, there's a big project coming up. We don't have the money, but we have to show some type of, forward thinking.
I hear you. Okay, thank you.
I have a question about the project that has riprap at the Adobe crossing of the creek. That looks like it's slated for this coming year. And I wanted to know how that, if I'm even on the same plane, if that project ties in with the fish ladder. Is that the same area or a different crossing of the creek?
Yes, Mayor, that's around the same vicinity. What has formed due to the flows has been, there's a void that's been created. So this project is to help fix the void at the meantime. And at the same time, we're working with the San Mateo RCD, Reclamation, Conservation. So we're also, I'm sitting in on that project as well. So, we've been trying to coordinate that, making sure that their project and our project will be coordinated.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly what I was thinking. That's why I asked is like, are those at the same location? Are they staggered in time? I just wasn't sure how they correlate. Thank you. In general, as I'm looking through the drain improvement projects, I see the strategy as you were just referring to it, Deputy Director Bautista, about putting those dollars into a future year that, we're going to need to find the funding for this. But collectively, as we're looking at that master plan, I think we may want to revisit this whole issue because it seems to me we're getting into the area of deferred maintenance where we're waiting for a funding source that, as Councilmember O'Neill said, may never come or may not come for a long time. And how are we prioritizing those projects in the meantime and making sure that we have a way to get them done? So I don't know I'll just put that out there for Director Peterson. If maybe at some point as we're doing the run up to the stormwater project, we could have a revisit on just that topic, because right now it feels kind of fragmented to me. I definitely noticed the Monterey Road one. I know that had been brought up previously in terms of Big Inch Creek, and I don't know if that's related to that same drainage area. So those are some of the concerns that I had too, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And just to clarify, one of the main goals of that storm drain master plan is to identify those capital projects that are needed for drainage. And as mentioned during my presentation, of course, that's a big goal of our capital improvement program, is to have those planning documents that kind of identify those big picture projects that we need to do and the smaller projects. So ultimately, we can plan for how we are going to fund those. So that's one of the reasons that we are moving that master plan project forward.
And it seems like we see, and Councilmember Vaterlos can speak to this perhaps more because I'm peripherally aware, but we see projects coming forward for funding through CCAG sometimes on these stormwater things. So it sounds to me like having that plan ready will enable us, maybe if we see those projects coming forward, to jump on this, let's try to address this one piece. That's a high priority. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, yes. It's one of the goals of those, as well as I mentioned, those master planning documents. So once we can identify those, if we see upcoming funding opportunities, we can pursue those. And funding agencies like to see that you're doing advanced planning and you're doing community outreach on those types of projects. Helps with getting grant funding.
Right.
Thank you for that comment.
Right, we've certainly seen that with the bike and ped area. So in light of that, something that has been mentioned recently several times in different arenas, I wanted to, it's not even in this plan at this point, but I wanted to touch on it, is there's been discussion about a parks master plan. And I wanted to understand the construct and how that would fit into what we're discussing tonight. Would a parks master plan be brought forward, for example, in this process as a CIP And if so, what might be a designated funding source, or would it be, as with the drainage we're discussing, an unfunded source? In other words, would this be something that it's appropriate to use the Davies funds for, or are those funds designated for immediate services in Parks and Rec? So I know this is a kind of left field question, but it occurred to me it's a large project area that's being discussed, and I know it's not incorporated into our CIP right now.
Yes, thank you for that question. I know that the Roy Davies Fund, my understanding, and I would certainly have Director Perez jump in here, is there are a broad array of projects that money will fund and is capable of funding. I do know that, and I guess I would ask, maybe first I'll throw that question over to Director Perez. He just jumped on. If you could discuss that a little bit more, what the Roy Davies Fund would fund, and also Parks Master Plan option for that.
Sure thing. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Michael Perez, Director of Parks, Beaches, and Recreation. Yes, it could fund that. That's possible. We have had a few discussions about it. That's a really, really, really big project, and it would be very expensive. And I think one of the things that we feel the money will be best used right now is to focus on the improvement of our playgrounds without tackling sort of the mammoth project of like a complete master plan for the parks. And we have made some effort to step up sort of the efficiency and the ability to handle more projects at one time, sort of quicker, instead of rolling things out for several years. We're trying to move things up into this next fiscal year so we can tackle more parks at one time and engage the help of a consultant on that project as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Vaterlas, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm trying to watch two things at once, so the screen with anyway. So certain things like the Cabrillo pedestrian crossing, it tells the money spent. That's completed and no more money will be spent on that project. Do we just keep them there for a while to let us, like, placeholders to say, hey, we finished this project? Or, I mean, it doesn't show any further money needed.
I could answer that question for you, Councilmember Vader.
Okay.
So any of the projects that are completed, they won't require any more money, and it just shows up in the book for one more year.
Okay.
It drops off.
Thank you. And I agreed about the Rockaway Creek issue and also Monterey. I think those are two major storm drain issues. I know at one point they did put the creek underground on Monterey. I thought they did. And I know that I've heard about additional problems with flooding there. And I think that those are important issues to take up as soon as we can. And if we have to do an assessment, then we may have to do an assessment to get them done. So I agree there. Thanks.
Okay, are there other, Councilmember O'Neill.
I noticed there, this is the first time I recall seeing it, so I might have missed it before, is that we're going to do a study, but we're actually considering a diet on Sharp Park Road. We're bringing it from 2 lanes down to 1 lane and a bike lane. I'm really concerned about that because given that road does get slick and wet and stuff, and having skidded on it myself once doing a whole donut, okay? I am concerned about that being a one-lane road, okay, that people won't be able to turn and avoid hitting the guy in front of them, you know, for whatever reason. So I hope when the analysis is done on that, is whether or not you're going to make it a one-lane road, that environmental conditions on Sharp Park with all the eucalyptus trees there and stuff will be taken into consideration. Okay. I also looked at, and I saw that in regards to the pier, okay, we're going for grant funding. It's going to be a total of $500,000 to repair the 40-foot section that fell, that was damaged, okay? But when you look at the pier report, there's like 164 panels there, and 80 of them, 50% of them, are either severe or I forget what the other word was they had, severe or extreme, something like that. It wasn't a good word. Okay, but like 50% of them. And I was wondering, what is the strategy to deal with that? And it didn't even really go, that I could see, go into the structural problems with the legs holding the thing up. And I was just wondering, how are we just going to continue going for grant funding for this, or what?
Yes, thank you very much for the question. And just to clarify, I think there was some information left out in that document. As I mentioned during my presentation, the project for the Pacifica Pier, that would take care, with that $500,000, the scope of that project is to take care of the panels that have major damage, severe damage, and also the panels that have, the panel that's missing, that 40-foot section. The scope of that project also takes into account looking at the other panels that have some moderate damage to minor damage and trying to do some patching on those panels as well. So it would address all of the panels, that project. So just for that clarification, because I know that I think there was some information left out on one of the sheets regarding that. And just to discuss a little bit about your comment regarding the Sharp Park Road, the road diet, that is something that is actually part of our approved bicycle and pedestrian master plan that was approved, I believe, several years ago. Typically, what we would do in any type of situation, even something that was already approved in a master plan document, is we would do a pilot type of program first, where you go in with cones and you simulate the road diet and you take data on the traffic impacts. And based on that, you make decisions and come to council and have those discussions on how to move forward on those projects.
Okay. No, do we have any data on the structural legs of the pier in terms of their safety? Because I am concerned about the liability to the city. Because I'm assuming our management agreement or lease agreement, whatever it is with the state, is we're assuming the liability.
So thank you for that question. So currently, the scope of this last engineering review was to look at all of the above deck elements on the pier and to move forward with trying to get grant funding for repair of those above deck elements like the railing. One of the other things that we're doing and we've looked into is what would it take to do an assessment of the entire pier, as you're talking about. Also, you know, the pilings. It's a much larger project. You actually have to get equipment that can get in the water, you know, go under the water, or have somebody dive down there to take a look at it. We know that that study would be expensive. So one of the things that we have been doing is also trying to look to see if there's opportunities for grant funding to fund that next study, because it would be a pretty expensive study. So we do
Okay.
have that on our radar. It's more of a funding issue to find the funds to do that study.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mayor Beckmeyer, I was going to say staff has about 4 more slides to the presentation, but it's on the ARPA funds portion.
Okay.
So, and I know we have to go to public comment. Did you want to, since council has asked a lot of questions about the CIP, did you want to do the ARPA presentation and questions and then go to public comment, or whatever your preference is?
I think that makes sense. Is that okay with you, council members? Forge ahead and complete the presentation, then we'll do public comment. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and transition then to that portion of the presentation.
Great, and Assistant City Manager Weremeister can dive in with this portion.
Thank you, Mayor and council members. My name is Tina Weremeister, Assistant City Manager. And I'll be presenting some more information on the American Rescue Plan Act. These 3 or 4 slides will be fairly short because unfortunately the state has not published new information. We were hoping they would do that before this meeting, but as of late this afternoon, they have not. So what I'll do is I'll review our funding strategies or priorities as we have discussed with the council in the last council presentation. And those are to assist with revenue loss to maintain government services. That's to address the $1.9 million deficit that was presented in the last budget presentation. The council is interested in pursuing economic initiatives focused on business assistance and retention and economic recovery planning. This could include contributions to existing small businesses through grant programs, tourism, marketing, and the like. Interested in initiatives to address homelessness, including community conversations regarding homelessness, which is a council identified priority this year, and assistance for the vehicularly housed individuals, such as a potential dumping station or making a contribution to a suitable safe parking site. And we were also, of course, considering covering continued costs to actually prevent COVID, such as funding PPEs and additional cleaning and sanitation in accordance with protocols. Next slide. We're also looking at limited term staff augmentation to assist with qualified initiatives or related programs. This included a 2-year limited term planner to provide needed staffing assistance to expedite processing of projects, a 2-year limited term public works project manager to also assist with processing projects and taking some pressure off of field services staff, and a 2-year limited term city clerk and human resources assistance. This will provide needed support to implement many areas of governance. HR has been impacted by the almost continuous changes to state regulations surrounding COVID, and they will probably continue to change. And the city clerk's office has been impacted by COVID as well. Being closed has placed a strain on the various Public Records Act requests, as well as providing additional support to run public meetings in a virtual setting. Improvements and modernization of ventilation systems to prevent airborne diseases, including COVID-19. Infrastructure projects that are specified as qualified in the Act. This could include stormwater infrastructure and pollution prevention and reduction improvements. And lastly, we had discussed the HEROES Fund, which we still need to put together more details and research for the council's consideration. Next slide. So in summary, we're still awaiting state confirmation of the city's allocation and the timing Whatever the timing is, it'll be in 2 disbursements, approximately 6 months apart. The American Rescue Plan Act funding is, according to council direction during the narrative budget report, is prioritized to cover revenue losses so that the city can maintain staff and service levels. And then the remainder of the funding would be used for the initiatives and programs that I had just mentioned. And you probably have noted in the staff report that the cost of all these initiatives exceeds the expected first disbursement. And so staff and the city manager will be putting together an implementation schedule for recommendations, and that will be developed in the future. And after release of more information, we will be bringing this information back to council for your final approval and direction. That concludes the report.
I just wanted to clarify the tranches. Are those 6 months or 12 months distribution cycle?
12 month.
Okay, thank you.
A question also is, council had previously approved a limited term person for, but did we ever fill that or not? I think it was a management analyst.
Yeah, that position was previously funded and it has not been filled as of yet.
Okay, so basically that's just like cost savings in the budget at this point.
Right.
And that is not funded through the ARPA funds. Okay. I just want to be sure. Correct.
But let me clarify on that we do intend now, so that was completely interrupted by COVID and no one being available. So we do attend, and just as a reminder, that's the position, management analyst position for 1 year. It is supposed to support economic development work as well as environmental sustainability initiatives. And so we do intend to move forward with the hiring of a management fellow or an intern for a year to do those tasks.
Great, thank you.
I guess in the staff report, you had mentioned working with the Chamber of Commerce to try to promote tourism and business support, et cetera. Okay. And I know we do not manage the BID, the Business Improvement District, but they have a contract with a woman that handles that for them. And I was wondering, this money, I would like to see maybe a different tact, tried to see if that could improve it. The lady that the bid uses, Hook, Line, and Thinker, I think is her name, or Sinker, something like that. Goes for brings travel writers in to write articles and has somebody come in and stuff. While and being on the web, I see Half Moon Bay tends to have somebody that markets Half Moon Bay with a drip method, writing different articles for different websites, for different magazines, all about Half Moon Bay. And I was wondering, do we have any ideas or thoughts on what we would like, being we're writing the check for this business and tourism person, any structure to that or what?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilmember O'Neill. And at this early point, it's really more of a placeholder of funding to then work with those other stakeholder groups and determine what would be the most, the most kind of bang for the buck strategy of marketing. The whole ARPA justification is to drive economic recovery and drive visitors to Pacifica. So what would be the best strategy? I don't think we have an answer for that now. And we'd want to work with the chamber and the bid and the Economic Development Committee's input and the Historical Society and other groups to really figure that out. and make sure if the city is going to be using its ARPA funding to fund that kind of contract, work for a limited period of time, that it's the most effective. And we would do that and bring it back to the council, to have council direction on how that's going to proceed. That's at least the initial thought on it.
Okay, and if I remember, we have 100,000 budgeted for that out of the ARPA funds, if I remember correctly.
Yes,
okay.
That is correct. Good memory.
And some of that is for small businesses, right? Not just for, yeah.
The whole bucket was 250,000. So
oh, okay.
150,000 was for direct business assistance, and we still need to, again, develop what would be the best strategy. It was mentioned at the last council meeting of dividing that between sort of, restaurants and other types of small businesses. So we would need to come back, at a future time with a recommendation on how that would roll forward. Again, a lot of these ARPA categories are identifying the concepts and the strategies, and then more specific work needs to be done in implementing them, and if as appropriate, receiving council direction on that and working with the stakeholder groups and how it's going to be implemented. So that whole bucket was 250 total for them in the preliminary numbers.
Thank you.
And that 150 is for Pacifica to control it, not to send it to SAMCETA or whoever, correct?
Well, I think one of the questions for the council will be, like the other grant programs, the money is for Pacifica businesses, but administering a grant program is more complicated, and SAMCETA so far with the Community Foundation has provided that structure to evaluate the applications, all the qualifications that were required to make it simple, but to make sure that it goes to Pacifica businesses in need.
That is what happened when we did that in the past, where we gave the 50,000, that it all went to Pacifica businesses only. They just did the administration, like Kevin said.
Right.
So again, on the ARPA strategies, we didn't have a lot of new information to present, but we have spent time continuing to analyze the guidelines and organize the information a bit differently. The chart that's in the staff report shows how each strategy fits into the allowable, ARPA guidelines. And we, for the sake of budget adoption, we need to adopt a balanced budget and identify funding for different strategies. But the details of implementing those strategies throughout now until the end of 2024, when the ARPA money needs to be spent, will be an iterative process. And, maybe between now and a year from now, there's other opportunities that come up that make more sense. So it's really like I said, an iterative process.
Okay, other comments or questions from council on ARPA or any of the other items that we've discussed? I'm not seeing any hands, so I think it's time for us to open public comment.
Mayor Beckmeyer, I see one hand raised at this time.
And I just want to reiterate that this is public comment on the items that we're discussing this evening with regard to the capital improvement project, with regard to ARPA or any other budgetary related item that we've been discussing this evening, as opposed to during general council meetings. This is a special meeting, so we're focused specifically on those items.
Hey, Christine Bowles, you are up for your public comment.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, Council. I just want to start by thanking Mayor Beckmeyer, Mayor Pro Tem Buren, Councilmember Vaderlos for remembering us here on Monterey Road. I thought I'd just clarify that Big Inch Creek is underground just in 2 houses up the hill from me at daylights at my house, and you know, just the flow of water and the drainage has done a lot of damage to the properties downstream from me, and I think the flooding at the school at Ocean Shore is a result of that that happened this January. And I know it's only been put on the priority projects this year, but I obtained letters that actually neighbors back in October of 2000 were trying to organize and get some of that work solved that long ago. So anyway, thank you for trying to find ways to fund it. And I just want to express my support for a special assessment district. I'd certainly be willing to pay to as a citizen to help solve those problems. And then I'm also hoping to get an update on the Manor Drive overpass widening that was identified as a priority project back in 2004. The document here mentions a Measure A for funding. So I'm just curious if that's something that's already been approved, or is that something that's going on the ballot this fall? And then also a friend of mine, Vicki Sundstrom, who's a civil engineer and traffic consultant, emailed the city a few months ago about this overpass because the concrete side panels on the bridge and the approaches on Oceana and Palmetto are spalling and the rebar is exposed and rusting. So she was concerned about that. I believe she was told that Caltrans would schedule an inspection last month. So I was just wondering if there's an update from Public Works. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Beckmeyer, I don't see any additional raised hands at this time.
Then coming back to council, we'll close public comment. And I would like to follow up on the comment about the overcrossing. I'm not sure which overcrossing that is, if that's the new one or the existing manor overcrossing. So perhaps we could hear from Deputy Director Bautista about that. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor. Sure, the Manor Drive overcrossing project, the first phase, which was the preliminary planning study, was funded through grants. It was funded through the Measure A program, and we completed that approximately a year and a half ago. So we completed the study, and currently we are waiting for grant applications through the TA, so we can start the next phase, which is the planning or the project initiation document. And when you do projects, that are touching highways that are controlled by Caltrans, there's definitely a process. So you go phase by phase by phase. So we just completed the preliminary phase, and we go into the planning document, and then we do environmental. As I said, we're just waiting to apply for grants to fund the next phase.
And with regard to the damage on the overcrossing, is that the same overcrossing that the request was to have Caltrans do the inspection?
Right. And so we have contacted Caltrans. We're just waiting to just hear back from them. We understand that there is some spalling on the bridge, so but they also need to do that bridge inspection, and they do bridge inspections throughout the district.
Is there any way to get that Caltrans to do their inspection? Because when they did the inspection of the overcrossing at Eureka Square, that one was so bad, they moved the construction of the new one up by like 1 or 2 years. And I mean, I have to admit, I've been on the Manor overcrossing waiting at the stoplight or the stop sign, and I've seen rebar in there, you know. So is there any way to emphasize to them that the rebar and pieces falling, et cetera?
Yes, Councilmember O'Neill, I will make sure to bring it to their attention, and they'll definitely see it during the inspection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. So the request is to get feedback from us, which we did give you a lot of. Receive the presentation and provide direction. Do you feel you have enough feedback and direction from us? Or are there other areas that you have questions about? Staff, I mean.
The council members provided a lot of great feedback and input and questions. So unless Director Peterson has any unclear items in her mind, I think we're good to proceed with the CIP.
Yes, I just want to thank all the council members. You gave a lot of great input. Really appreciate it. So thank you.
And I want to thank staff for your work on this. I know it's a lot of detail, and we do appreciate what you're doing. It'll be really helpful having that number thing that Council Member Big Stick brought up modified so that we can keep after our projects and find the right pages, because it is a very detailed and lengthy document, and I mean, it needs to be with all that we have for over a 5-year period. So thank you very much for your work on that. We do have another closed session coming up. So what I'm going to propose is that we have a 5-minute break. We'll adjourn to a closed session, and we'll have a 5-minute break before we start. And I'll accept public comment on the item prior to us going on that break. Is that appropriate, City Attorney and City Clerk? All right, so I'll just state the item as a conference with legal counsel, existing litigation pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Gary et al. Versus the City of Pacifica, United States District Court, Northern District of California, San Francisco, case number 3:CV-01780BC. And we'll have any public comment on this item.
Any members of the public attending, please raise your hand at this time for any public comments on the closed session item as read by the mayor. Mayor Beckmeyer, I see no raised hands at this time.
All right. Then we will adjourn to our closed session. It's 8:37. Let's come back at 8:42. Thank you. And then we will return to open session with the report out.
The recording has stopped.